Well, good evening. It's great to be with you guys tonight. It's been a busy day. I started off about 7 this morning, heading to Dahlonega, Georgia, meeting up there with the counseling department up there, and we're going to be doing some stuff with them here next month on a workshop. So it's good to finish the evening with you guys. This is the fifth Tuesday night kind of deal, right? Is that what this is?
Yes.
So, so I'm working fifth Tuesday night, right? I used to love fifth Sunday night. Because I was a preacher, and on fifth Sunday night I got a break because that was when we do the singing. You know, we'd have fifth Sunday night singing where I grew up. So anyway, it's great to be with you guys tonight. I just kind of want to give you an overview of what I do. Been at this for a few years now. Was honored in 2016 to be the recipient of the 2016 Trinity Awards Emergency Responder of the Year, and North Georgia, University of North Georgia. It was North Georgia College when I was there, but just really overwhelmed. Back in the spring, they honored me as the 2018 Alumni of the Year for the work that we do in suicide intervention. So that's what I do. So if you didn't know you were coming here for suicide intervention class, that's Tammy's fault because she should have told you. But it's funny, I was teaching at a big convention center, hotel type thing one day, and there were several different things going on, and a man came in running in late, and he looked kind of confused, and he said, "What class is this?" I said, "It's suicide intervention class." He said, "Oh, no, I'm in the wrong class. I'm here for a salesmanship course." I said, "Well, you might learn a thing or two, so you stick around if you want to." But anyway, I got just a little bit of time with you this evening, so I want to jump right in to this presentation. I call it my Bridge of Hope. You might imagine that being the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. Anybody ever been out to the Golden Gate Bridge? I want to share a little bit about that here in just a minute, but everyone that has had thoughts of suicide, and that's a lot of people, by the way, 1 out of 20 people have thoughts of suicide. 1 out of 300 people in a given year in the U.S. will attempt suicide. That's a lot of people, over 1 million people a year. So do the math, that's 1 out of 300, right? And so our goal, my purpose in being here tonight, is to help maybe give you just a little bit of skill, and I'll share some stuff here at the end on some ways that you can get some more, but just awareness. That's what I want to do tonight, is kind of raise your awareness about what is going on. Is everybody here Fayette County, or y'all come from different areas? Clayton, anybody from Clayton? Coweta? Okay. Who said that? Coweta? Spalding? Okay, so I'm going to kind of focus tonight on Fayette County, but Coweta pretty much mirrors Fayette County. Spalding's about the same. I was up in North Georgia today, as I mentioned, and if you take the 25 most northern counties in the state of Georgia, 80% of them are above the national average for suicide. It's interesting. So that's the reason we were up there. But Kevin Briggs is a friend of mine. We've done some stuff online together. He's an author. As you can see, he was a law enforcement with California Highway Patrol for many years. He's former Army. And we'll hopefully be able to do another online presentation with him. He serves as one of our advisory members of Armed Forces Mission. But the interesting thing about what he does and what I do, he gets people when they are on the bridge. They're on the bridge, literally on the bridge. I have done that, not as much as Kevin has. My goal is to get to them before they get to the bridge. And when I say bridge, I mean that in a proverbial way. Whatever that bridge is, it might be some other means, but my goal is to get to them before they get to that bridge. And so Kevin is our last line of defense. If you and I haven't gotten to that person, then he's the one that hopefully can. So that's what we train people for, is not just to get people when they're on the bridge. That would scare most of us to death in this room if we thought we had to go out to the California, the Golden Gate Bridge to save people. No, that's reserved for just a few people like Kevin Briggs. If he were here tonight, what he would say to you is the same thing I'm saying to you. No, you don't want to do my job. You don't want to even do my job. But if I can train you and help you raise your awareness so that you can get to people before they get to the bridge, so that you can get them to Tammy and other people, or take them to the hospital, or whatever it is that needs to happen. It's a lot like CPR in that regard. You know, you don't have to be a surgeon to know CPR, right? But it sure is nice to know there's a lot of folks that know CPR, right? Yep. So it saves lives. Does that mean that it's going to fix anything? No, that's just going to keep them alive long enough for hopefully the surgeon to come in and fix some things, right? So that's kind of the difference between what Kevin and I do. But the bottom line is tonight, what I want you to do, instead of it being a bridge of hopelessness, I want you to begin to see yourself as the bridge of hope. You are to be the bridge of hope for the people that are on the bridge of hopelessness. That's what we really want you to do. And that's why I wanted to share that picture there about Kevin. But become the bridge of hope. I was on a college campus today, so I'll just share this with you right quick. Every year, more than 1,100 suicides happen on college campuses. Now, we have a college campus in this community now, right? We got the one over in Peachtree City. We got one right down the road at Georgia Military College. So the reality is our risks have gone up. Think about that for a minute. The fact that we now have a college campus, our risk goes up. I tell people all the time, if you have kids, your risk of knowing about suicide went up. Because teenagers, if you're a teenager, you're at risk. You know, just the fact that you're a teenager, without any problems, just the fact that you're a teenager puts you at a higher category of risk. So one of the things that we do, and as we see here in the tagline here at the bottom, is we train people to save people. Because my mantra is this: intervention saves lives. We know this. I know this from my own personal experiences, over 800 suicide interventions that I've done. Wow. So, and here's the thing. Every one that I've worked with is still alive today. Every one of them. So, you know, that's neat. And yet I've lost people too. I was 75 yards away from Kyle Lovett when he took his life in Peachtree City on January 13, 2016. I didn't know Kyle. I wasn't interacting with Kyle. I was walking into Longhorn Steakhouse. But Kyle killed himself at the red light during rush hour traffic on January 13th. I'll never forget that date. I remember the dates of the ones that I lost because I didn't know that they were hurting. Isn't that interesting? I can't tell you any of the dates of the 800 that we've saved, but I can tell you the dates of the ones that I've lost because nobody told me and nobody knew to ask. How many of you have been to a funeral that was the result of suicide? Can I just see a showing of hands? A few of you have. It's amazing to me. It is amazing to me that so many times when we go to a visitation, and I guess it's because of what I do. People come up to me, did you know? No, I hadn't seen the person in 2 or 3 years or whatever. But I hear this, we didn't see that coming. Y'all ever heard that? Oh, yes. We just didn't see that coming. So what I want to do tonight is hopefully just give you just a taste of what I do on a regular basis that most people would say, how did you see that coming? Mm-hmm. And it's not because I'm clairvoyant. It's not because I have a crystal ball. It's not because I have a time machine. Since we are in a faith community tonight, I'll just go ahead and share it's discernment. Yeah. That's a lot about what it is. It's discernment. Mm-hmm. But there's also something else that I'll help you clue you into here in just a little bit, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So, among 15 to 24-year-olds, suicide is the second leading cause of death now. It used to be the third, but now it's the second leading cause of death. Every day across the United States of America, more than 3,500 people that are teenagers under the age of 20 attempt suicide. Thank goodness most of them are not successful in their attempts, but that's the reality. And so one attempt can lead to a potential second attempt. In 2017, this is just one, I want to go ahead and share this with you. Really irrelevant for you guys. This is Lumpkin County, but just for what I shared with them today, 150% higher than the national average. And for the past 20 years, it's been 33% higher than the national average. And that's North Georgia. Here's the interesting thing. This is one of the reasons I share this with you, because how many of y'all are from the mountains? Anybody from the mountains? Anybody want to move to the mountains? Yeah, I do. That's why I go to North Georgia as much as I can. But here's what's interesting about that stat. If you look across the country, not just Georgia, Utah, Tennessee, Colorado, the higher the elevation, the higher risk of suicide. Isn't that interesting? And there's a lot of discussion on why that is. You know, somebody said it's oxygen deprivation. No, you got to be on top of Mount McKinley for that. You know, I would imagine the oxygen in Dahlonega, Georgia is a lot better than the oxygen in Atlanta, Georgia. So that's not it. Yes, ma'am.
I heard that Seattle, Washington is one of the most prominent places of suicide.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sure is. So what is it about that? Well, part of it's culture. You know, but the other thing may be resources. That's why we were up in North Georgia today. I will say this about Lumpkin, or about Fayette County. Fayette County, for the past 2 of the past 3 years, we've been higher than the national average. Right here in Fayette County. Coweta County. Who said Coweta County? Coweta is higher than the national average. Everybody in the state, every community in the state of Georgia is trending up. For the past 10 years, we've seen a 30% increase in suicide. And that's not just, some people say, well, yes, because the population is growing. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about as a percentage of a group, the rate of suicide among people is increasing. It's increased 30% here in the state of Georgia over the past 10 years. By the way, these are just some of the pictures of folks that I've lost. And I didn't know that they were hurting. Andreas died in November last year. Peachtree City called me to be at the house with his mom and dad, and it was a tough day. Here's what you should understand. Suicide is a process. It's a process. It's not a state. I mean, you don't just wake up one morning and say, hey, I think I'm going to kill myself today. If you have that thought, something was moving you in that direction for some time. In fact, we know, some people say, especially among teenagers, it was very impulsive. Well, maybe not. What might seem impulsive has been stirring in their heart and mind for a while. And it reaches a point where the resilience has just been crushed to the point. We know what the word resilience means, right? It's the ability to bounce back, right? And you can take a tennis ball and wear that tennis ball out, and eventually it won't bounce back. Y'all know that, right? It can be crushed and it won't bounce. It just eggs, certainly they're not going to bounce, are they? But a person's coping capabilities become so fragile that when that last thing hits them, they don't bounce back. And so that's what we want to try to get to that person before their last reserve, their last ounce of resilience is dwindled away. So we need to understand then that suicide is a process that takes time. It's not what you think. Suicide is not the result of wanting to die. I shared that today with the counselors at North Georgia. They said, have you got any parting words to share with us today? I would say this. Suicide is, I've done over 800 suicide interventions. I've never met anybody that really wanted to die. That sounds kind of contrary, doesn't it? Suicide is not the result of wanting to die. It's the result of loss. And that loss can be anything. It can be the loss of health. It can be the loss of a loved one, a relationship, a divorce. It can be the loss of a child to leukemia. It can be the loss of a job, your integrity, your honor. Had an admiral that got caught on the carpet for having one too many ribbons on his chest. Shortly thereafter, he took his life. Somebody might say, I wouldn't kill myself over a ribbon on my chest. Well, he didn't either. That was just the tip of the iceberg, right? everything else that had gone on before that. We had a general just a few years ago, that was supposed to take command of a post in Alabama. Took his life the day before he was supposed to take command. What was going on there? We've had suicides here in this community. We're going to look at one specifically here in just a few minutes. But a lot of people said, we didn't see that coming. There were no signs. And so we want to understand that you can still save a life. Because a lot of people say, if there's no signs, then we can't help people. That's just going to be the ones that we'll find out after they've taken their life. And it's just going to be a tragedy because nobody's there to help them. I want to show you tonight that that's not the truth. The truth is we can help them. I mean, isn't that what God said? When you felt like you were utterly helpless and without hope at the right time, right? So suicide's not the result of wanting to die. I'll share this with you. If there's a God, do something now. That was a quote from a Marine a few years ago. I didn't know him. A friend of mine had asked me to call him. She said, "Did you work with Marines?" I said, "Yeah, we work with anybody." And she told me what was going on, and he's out of the service now, medically discharged, PTSD. She called me about 9 o'clock that morning, and I said, "I tell you what, I'll call him at noon because he's in another state on the other side of the country. I'm not going to wake him up if I don't have to." And so I called him at noon, and come to find out, he had just attempted suicide just before I called him. Now here's the interesting thing. I didn't know him. I began the conversation when he answered the phone. "Hi, this is Chaplain Kenneth Koon." And he said, "Who?" I said, "Well, you don't know me, but I'm a friend of so-and-so." And he said, "Well, Chaplain, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not a religious man." That was the first words out of his mouth. And I said, "That's okay, I'm not either." Kind of threw it. Some of y'all get that, right? It's relationship. Religion is man's attempt at God. Relationship is God's coming to man. So it's about relationship. So that kind of threw him off. You know, he wasn't expecting me to say that. And so we got into a conversation, and he told me everything that was going on. We were 15 or 20 minutes in that conversation. I said, "Have you had thoughts of suicide?" He said, "It's more than that." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I attempted suicide." I said, "When was that?" He said, "About 15 minutes ago."
Whoa.
And the weapon misfired. I said, "What did you do after that?" He said, "Well, I put the gun down on the table." He said, "If there's a God, do something now." And the phone rang, and we've been talking for the past 15 minutes. I said, "Dad, let me make sure you're okay." He said, "Yeah, I'm okay." "Well, I've got a question. I'm just wondering." I said, "Help me connect the dots here. You started off the conversation saying, 'I'm not a religious man.' But 15 minutes ago, you said, 'If there's a God, do something now.' Can you kind of connect the dots for me?" He said, "That's what I've been doing for 15 minutes. Isn't that neat?
Yes.
That was about 2 or 3 years ago. He's still alive today. And it's about relationship. You know, it really is. And I'm talking about on the horizontal plane. Yes, this one too, the vertical. But there's incredible power in that horizontal plane for you and I to connect with one another. You know, the reality is you are your brother's keeper. It was a rhetorical question. We know that, right? Am I my brother's keeper? Yeah, you are. You are. So, all the talk that we hear most of the time, if you Google suicide intervention, most of the time you're going to see signs. Look for the signs. Well, let's take an honesty poll right quick. How many of you have ever ran through a stop sign? Let's be honest. Tammy's not raising her hand. You even rolled through the stop sign, right? You saw it, you rolled up to, and we didn't really stop, you know? I've had the police say, "Well, you rolled through it." There wasn't nobody coming, I stopped. No, you rolled through the stop sign. In other words, you ignored the sign, right? So a lot of times what's happening is people are putting out signs and we ignore them, we don't understand them, we misinterpret them, we sweep it under the rug, we don't act like we don't see it, whatever the case may be. But then there are times when there are no signs. There are no signs. 1 out of 5 teenagers that are suicidal will never present any signs of suicidal ideation. 1 out of 5. What's that, 20%? I'm not real good at math, but that's 20%. Will not show any signs. They'll put on that Sunday go to church smile, act like everything's okay, and then they end up taking their life. And everybody goes, we didn't see that coming. So sometimes there are no signs. So signs are the things that people say or do. Those are the things that people say or do. It's changes in behavior. It might be the stuff they're posting on Facebook. I had a call just a few nights ago. I don't know anything about Reddit. Are y'all familiar with Reddit? No. It's an app or something. I mean, I can't keep up with all the stuff out there. But a university student was posting stuff on Reddit. He's going to end his life. I mean, there's no way for me to do anything about it. The guy, it's an anonymous profile. And all we can do is encourage him to reach out to the Georgia Crisis Line. That's all we could do. I mean, I don't know where this guy's at. I can't do anything for him. That's a sign, you know, when they're posting stuff on Facebook, when they're giving the things away, when they're going to visit old friends they haven't seen in a while. I'm going to go visit old so-and-so. We haven't seen each other. So good to see you again, you know, that kind of thing. I'm so glad I finally got to see you. God bless you and good luck in the rest of your life. That's kind of weird, right? Well, guess what? It might not have used to be before tonight, but tonight it's going to be kind of weird because now you're going to realize sometimes people are reconnecting to say goodbye. Circumstances are the challenges that impact personal resilience. And any change in circumstance can create the transition point that negatively impacts personal resilience. So here's the thing. People say, how did you know? I had a first sergeant one time, he said, how did you know? I wasn't putting any signs out there. If you've been in the military, you know most first sergeants are not going to show anybody any signs of what's going on in their life. They just have to maintain that facade. And even if it's not real, because they're the first sergeant. But he said, how did you know? Well, it wasn't because of the signs, it was because of the circumstances. And so really, that's where the discernment comes in. You look at the signs of the times, right? Well, it looks all the same to me. No, what's the circumstances? What's going on? That's what we need to understand. What's going on in this person's life? Isn't that what Jesus used to do? He'd walk up to people and just start talking to them because he knew the circumstances. They might not have shown any signs. The woman at the well, he knew the circumstances. So when we know the circumstances in a person's life, any change in circumstance can negatively impact our resilience. And so we can act like everything's okay and it's not really okay. Had a suicide a few years ago, right here in this community, a young man, and the parents asked me to come in and do a class sort of like this one. And every one of the parents said there were no signs, there were no signs, there were no signs. But then you begin to do some forensics on what was going on in his life. And I had one of the parents, I said, well, where is so-and-so? I thought she was coming to the class today. And she said, my son would never be suicidal. I don't need to come to this class. Wow, really? Well, what about your friend's son? Right? What about your cousin? What about your neighbor, your mother, your wife? You know, whoever it is, next door neighbor. What about them? This is training that we can use to help other people. You may not think your son's suicidal. I think you're mistaken because his best friend just killed himself. So now he's in an even higher risk. But my son would never be suicidal. That's sort of like saying my son doesn't know how to make a pound cake. Well, that's kind of weird, Ken. What do you mean by that? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. What are the ingredients in a pound cake? Anybody? Give me one. Flour. I heard flour, so we'll just say this: flour, butter, sugar. Somebody say eggs?
I did.
What about vanilla maybe?
Vanilla.
All right, so we got all these ingredients in a pound cake. You say, yeah, but my son doesn't know how to make a pound cake. It doesn't matter. If the ingredients are on the table, in the kitchen, on the counter, whatever the case may be, your son can make a mess. Does that hit home for you? Because here's the reality. How many ingredients does it take to make a mess? Can we make a mess with a bag of sugar? I've done that before. If you don't get it up, the ants are going to be all over the place, right? Can you make a mess with a dozen eggs? I've done that one before. I mean, I'm not intentionally trying to do this. It just happened. I'm kind of a klutz, right? Can you make a mess? You see what I'm saying? All these ingredients. Well, you begin to look at this person's life. He didn't have just one ingredient. He had several ingredients going on in his life. So, for example, mom and dad are getting a divorce. Is that an ingredient? That's a changing circumstance. So that's one. He's going to have to move to another school district in his senior year of high school. Does that put him at risk? Yeah. He's moving in with the grandparents. His dad's moving out of the state. Does that put him at risk? His girlfriend's probably going to break up with him because she's now 90 miles away from him, right? All of these things are ingredients in that young man's life, but all the parents said we didn't see any signs. There weren't any signs. But if you've been aware of the circumstances of how that whittles away at your resilience, and some people say, well, just suck it up. Tough times make you tough. No, we can't say that.
We're going to have time for questions and answers.
We can't really say that, can we? Who else? You're prior military, didn't you raise your hand? Are you prior military? What branch?
Army.
Army?
Air Force.
Air Force. So we went to basic training, right? Were you at Benning or where were you at for basic training?
McCullough.
Okay. So here's the thing about basic training. It was good for us, right? We didn't like it. Didn't like it. Right?
Right.
We didn't like it. I mean, but I look back on it nowadays and, 30 years later, I'd say it was good for me. And I do have fond memories. I hated it at the time. But here's the interesting thing. If you knew, did you spend a career in the Army or did you get in and get?
10.
Okay, so you did 10 years, okay. So would you have done 10 years if you knew that every day was going to be like basic training? No. Yeah, nobody would. Nobody would, wouldn't they? The point I'm getting at is we can't go around telling people to suck it up every single day. And yet a general at Fort Bliss was relieved of command because that's what he tweeted. I'm so sick and tired of soldiers killing themselves. I wish they'd just suck it up.
Oh, wow.
So his JAG officer told him to take that down, but when it's out there, it's already gone viral. It doesn't matter whether you take it down or not. And so we got to be careful about telling people to just suck it up, get over it. That's a judgmental attitude. And we don't want to be judgmental in our attitude if we're trying to truly help people, right? Just like you wouldn't have put in 10 years if it'd been like that every single day, right? It was good for us, but water's good for us too, right? Think about this for a minute. 8 of these a day is probably pretty good for me. Wow, if 8 are good for me, I think I'm going to do 100 a day, right? That would kill us. Y'all know that, right? It would literally kill us. It'd wipe out all of our electrolytes and we'd go into a coma and eventually die because we've washed out every nutrient from our body. So that's called toxicity, right? So 10 years of toxicity would have caused a big problem in the military. You wouldn't have lasted. I wouldn't have lasted. You wouldn't. Nobody would. So that's the point I make. We can't go around telling people you just need to think straight. And I will say this in this community of faith, we also need to be really careful about saying we just need to have more faith.
Right.
Say, what was that last?
You just need to have more faith,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Just quoting scripture.
You just need to have more faith. That's very dangerous to do that. Because what it does, it puts that person, it begins to make them feel like, well, gee, I'm just a failure all the way around. I want to have faith. What does the Bible say? Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, right? There's a part of me that wants to believe, but I'm having a hard time believing. And so when we start drilling people on you just need to have more faith, that becomes toxic. All right, so more on circumstances. The circumstances of life provide the ground for the seed of suicidal thought to germinate. So in other words, if we look at what's going on in a person's life, we just need to go ahead and assume that they're probably having thoughts of suicide. We already know statistically 1 out of 20 people is having thoughts of suicide every day. So realistically, I mean, every 20th person that you ask, you know, they're going to be suicidal. You probably would lose friends if you did that. You know, I'm asking everybody if I have suicidal thoughts. People that join churches. Here's one to think about. People walk, I grew up in this old church where you walk down the aisle and join the church, right? A lot of churches don't do that nowadays. But think about this for a minute. We already know that 1 out of 20 people at any given time are having thoughts of suicide. And the reality is that people are walking down the aisle is probably even higher because they're looking for something. Lifeway did a study a few years ago that a huge percentage of people went to church the month before they killed themselves, even though they had not been going to church on a regular basis. Does that kind of resonate with you? They were looking for something. So if you're a pastor of a church, what I tell pastors nowadays, great, your church is growing, but a lot of people that are joining your church are suicidal. And you need to be aware of that. So being aware of the transition point is the first step in providing intervention care.
I have a question. Why do you think that is? Maybe they're going to church seeking that relationship with God, but they're not finding it in the church?
Oh, there's all kind of reasons.
Just religion?
Yeah, they're looking for something.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are hoping that they might find God. Some people may be mad at God, and they're trying to make peace with what they're planning to do. So there's no rhyme nor reason to it. We can't put a cookie cutter on this thing. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter suicide. Every suicide is different. And so what might be true of one person that does that, who just went to church last week, won't be true of the other person that does it next week. But yeah, they're looking for something. And the reality is, anytime we do have signs, that's a cry from somebody for help. How do we know that? Because what did I say earlier? Suicide is not the result of wanting to die. People are going to put out signs, even if they think that they want to die. It's not the result of wanting to die. It's the result of loss that leads to hopelessness. And what does the good book say about hopelessness? Without hope, without vision, the people perish, right? See how it all kind of ties together? So be alert to these things: failed relationships, family history, prior attempts, poor social skills, depression. 99.9% of the time, depression is there whether it's diagnosed or not. And I can share this with you guys. I don't get to talk this way a lot because I'm in a secular setting where they'll kick me out of the room, right? But in this setting, I'll share this with you. You know, I had a preacher one time that said, well, if you're a true believer, you wouldn't have those thoughts. Well, then that means that Moses wasn't a true believer, Elijah wasn't a true believer, Jonah wasn't, because he attempted. But Elijah, after his great victory on Mount Carmel, came down off the mountain and went and hid in a cave. He isolated himself. That's a sign, right? He isolated himself. Moses said he wanted to die. I mean, why did you put me out here in the wilderness with these people? He didn't even get to go into the promised land. He had every reason to kill himself. God failed him. Not really, but in his mind, for a moment, that's what he thought, right? Because I've been out here for 40 stinking years and I'm not going to get to go into the promised land because I made one mistake, right? Jonah, look at that story. I mean, oh my goodness. Talk about the spiral of depression. It says it in the Bible. He went down to Nineveh. He went down to the seashore. He went down into the boat. He went down into the water, and he went down into the belly of the fish. He was just spiraling down, 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 down. And we get sucked in that vortex. There's nothing going to get you out of that vortex. You say, well, yeah, but I got faith. Well, all those men wanted to die. Somebody said, I literally had a preacher one time say, yeah, but those were all Old Testament. Oh, wait a
I
minute.
have a New Testament example.
Well, Paul. I look at Paul.
I was
If-
thinking John the Baptist, but okay.
Well, yeah. But if I'd been a contemporary of the Apostle Paul, I would have been in a conversation with him. Paul, what are you talking about when you say I would rather die and go and be with the Lord? You know, no. He would have set me straight, but I would have been in a conversation with him because he's sending me this signal that he really doesn't want to be here, right? So I would have been having a conversation with him. I've asked the question thousands of times, by the way, and I've had over 800 that have said yeah. So I'm not always right, but I'm always willing to ask the question. And that's what we have to do. You have to have the courage to ask the question.
Paul said, we despaired even of life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was going to bring up that John the Baptist even said, are you the Messiah or should we be looking for someone else? Even though that wasn't a very big sign, but it was that comment basically saying, I'm losing hope.
Oh, yeah. That's a great point. Thank you. Great point. Absolutely. Think about the teen years for a minute. The perfect storm is happening in the teen years. Not only is it just being a teenager today, right? I mean, I was watching the news the other night, just flabbergasted that parents were coming out on a football field and they were all attacking each other. Did y'all see that one? What kind of example is that setting for teenagers? They don't have anybody nowadays, it seems like, that wants to be a mentor. They want to go out there and fight with each other. And that ain't right. But they got their own hormones, they got risky behavior. Cyberbullying is huge. You know, at least when I was a kid, I mean, I didn't get a phone till I was like 25, 30 years old, right? So I didn't have a phone, you know. We had landlines. And when we went home, at least if the bully was, you know, if we were getting bullied at school, we could come home and we had a refuge. Homes nowadays are not refuge. You go and the child can be in his room all by himself. And he's still being bullied online. And he's sitting there watching it, right? And so they begin to spiral. They're not in their room doing their homework. They're in their room just going downhill, further and further and further. So what's going on here? Let's imagine for a moment. Let's just go into this make-believe world for a minute. Not really make-believe. This is happening every day. But let's just pretend for a minute. How many of y'all are school teachers, by the way? Anybody a school teacher? So let's say it's Monday morning. And you got the quarterback here. And Friday night, football game, homecoming, and he blew it. And let's just say scouts were there in Georgia. Is that okay if we say Georgia? They're in the stands, right? And he blew it. And he knew it. Everybody knew it. And they just got stomped at homecoming, right? And he's thinking on Monday morning with all the Monday morning quarterbacks giving him advice, man, life is just miserable. I'm not going to get that scholarship to Georgia. And let's just say for a moment that his girlfriend Friday night was trying to decide whether she was going to break up with him after homecoming. And the deciding factor, does this sound crazy? This happens all the time. The deciding factor was if he wins the game, I'll stay with him. If he loses the game, I'm breaking up with him. Can y'all see that happening? Folks, it happens every day. So he lost the game, lost his girlfriend all in one weekend, lost his hopes of a scholarship to Georgia in his mind, right? So you're the school teacher. You know, we train a lot of law enforcement, school resource officers. You're the school resource officer. Or maybe he's the kid from your church. Or maybe he's your next door neighbor. And you were at the game. And you see him looking like that the day after school. What can we do? What's going on? Well, he's spiraling downward. So I want to be in a conversation with him. What's going on with the young lady who didn't get to go to the prom? What would you say to her? I posted this online to get a response from some people back a year or so ago. It was this very picture I think I posted. A young girl, never got to date. She stayed home, close to home. A boy asked her to go to the prom. And the parents said, yes, you can go. Got to be in at 11, but you can go to the prom. So her mom goes out and gets her a nice dress. They get all dolled up. The dad even rents a limo, gives the limo driver the boy's address to pick him up first, and then come over like the knight in shining armor and pick his daughter up so that he can meet him, right? Well, the limo never shows up. The dad calls and is like, what's going on? And the limo driver said, well, the boy canceled the ride. He said he wasn't ever intended to go on that ride. It was all a joke at her expense. What do you think's going on with her? You think that might have hurt her? I posted that simulation online. I got back a bunch of angry fathers who said, I'm going to whip somebody's butt. That's not what we want to do, right? That's not the proper response. Yeah, did we need to talk to the boy? Yeah. I'm more concerned. I don't have daughters. But if I did have a daughter, I would be in a conversation with her. Honey, I'm so sorry that happened. And just drill down and check on her and see how she's doing. And if I see that she's continuing to meander around that pool of, why did this happen to me? I'm going to ask her, honey, are you having thoughts of suicide? I'm going to ask her that question. And I might preface it. I might say, sometimes when kids do things like this to other kids, they have thoughts of suicide. Have you had thoughts of suicide? Because what it does is it normalizes the question. Other kids have had that thought too. And it is a thought, right? Have you had those thoughts? Yeah, I have. Folks, I want to tell you, that's the beginning of resilience being restored, because she was willing to say yes. That's a movement back toward life, because we teeter back and forth between life and death every day. What did the Bible say? I set before you today life and death, the blessing and the curse, right? And that's the way a person is when they're having those thoughts of suicide. They're trying to figure out, do I go this way or that way? And they may be leaning toward death. But a right word at the right moment is like apples of gold and baskets of silver. And it can outweigh that darkness and bring them back to life. I think that's the example that Jesus was trying to give us when he brought Lazarus back to life, right? I give you this power to help restore hope so that you can pass it on to other people. So, my question would be to her, have you had some thoughts of suicide? Because I'm concerned about you. And there's a very good chance she might say yes. So, be the 1%. You be the 1%. We got 110,000 people that live in Fayette County, Georgia. 1% would be what, 1,000 people? Imagine this for a moment. What if 1,000 people were trained in suicide intervention in this community? Do you think that we might be moving in the right direction if that happened? Oh my goodness. Let me tell you something. There's a community out there that's the strongest community in the state of Georgia. There's a community out there somewhere in this country that's the strongest community in the United States of America. Now I want to raise a question. Do y'all think y'all know what community is the strongest in the state of Georgia when it comes to suicide intervention? Anybody want to take a guess? I'll tell you this right now. It's not Fayette, it's not Coweta, and it's not Spalding County. Anybody want to guess? Fulton's doing pretty good, actually. The resources are there, so they're actually better than the national average. But there's another one I'm thinking about, and it's pretty close by. Y'all want me to go ahead and tell you? It's Clayton County. Clayton County is the strongest community in the state of Georgia when it comes to suicide. The worst county, Dawson County. Dawson County. Now here's something interesting about that. I bring this up for a very specific purpose. Dawson County is predominantly what? White, isn't it? Clayton County is predominantly black or African American. What do you prefer, by the way? Black or African American?
It doesn't matter.
You know what?
I'm over it now.
Good. Tell me your name. Billy?
Yes.
Billy, I asked that for a purpose. I do this in every one of my workshops. Because how many white people have wanted to ask that question, but you were afraid to? We got a few. And you say it really doesn't matter. You know, I go all over the place asking that question, and when we have a setting like this, and that's the consensus, it doesn't really matter. But white people go around scared to death, not knowing, right?
I don't want to say the wrong thing.
You know, I don't like the word Caucasian. I can't stand that word. It sounds like cauliflower to me. Cauliflower is white, by the way, right? It is white. So you could call me Caucasian Ken if you wanted to. Or you call me Cauliflower Ken or whatever you want to, you know.
Chicken skin.
Chickens. But here's the reason I asked that. Here's the reason I asked that. Because the strongest community in the state of Georgia is Clayton County. And it's predominantly black. So the next question I asked, that did not offend you for me to ask you those questions, did it? Wow. But we raised our hands and said we were afraid to ask that question. Right? And here's the thing, the corollary. Suicide's the same way. People are afraid that you're going to offend somebody if I said, are you having thoughts of suicide?
Wow, that's true.
No, I've never met anybody that was offended. I've had people say, no, Ken, I'm not. But the next word they say is, no, but thanks for asking. So I want to ask, are y'all glad I kind of asked that question a minute ago? It kind of takes the air out of your fear, doesn't it? Now there's nothing to fear anymore because Ken asked that question to Billy. And he said it don't matter. Right? Right? It takes the fear out. So here's what I'm saying. If you will ask the suicide question, it'll take your fear away. Because a lot of people walk in fear. And what's the Bible say? Don't fear, don't fear, don't fear, don't fear. Okay, then go ask that person if they're having thoughts of suicide. Right? But why is it that the Clayton County community is stronger than the Dawson County community, which is predominantly white? I've asked that question in hundreds of places. What do you think people say? Anybody?
I think it's maybe more family, togetherness.
Yeah?
Maybe, the whites are just kind of out there on their own. They leave their kids and they go on and
So there's a culture thing.
do their own selfish thing.
More community.
I had an female Atlanta police officer who said, my grandmother wouldn't let me get away with nothing, right? That's what she said. I had another one that said faith. So there is a certain element of spirituality that might be missing in the typical white community. I got to tell you right now, my favorite place to preach is a predominantly black church. Man, I get on fire doing that. I mean, I'm just being honest. And my wife will tell you, man, I can't shut up. But it's important for us to ask these questions, and we go around filled with fear.
Yeah.
And see, that's the whole premise behind suicide. People are filled with fear, and therefore we're not going out asking questions that can save lives. Think about this for a minute. And I may be wrong, but I think I'm right. It wasn't so much the statements that changed minds in the Gospels, it was the questions. Jesus was the master of asking questions, right? Who do you say that I am? What do you want me to do for you? Do you want to be made whole? Questions have incredible, incredible power. It was a question that saved my life. About 10 years ago, my oldest son, asked me, "Dad, are you having thoughts of suicide?" Because I had reached a point where I thought that the best thing that my family could ever have happen was for me to not be here anymore. And so my oldest son asked, "Dad, are you having thoughts of suicide?" And it saved my life. And that's why I do what I do today. Because I caught hold of a vision when I was at my weakest and ready to give up. God gave me a new vision. And he used my son to do it. You know, that's what's neat to me. God gives us glimpses of the gospel if we're willing to look at it. If we're willing to have eyes to see it. God sent me my son to remind me of his son. And being reminded of his son, my life and hope was restored. So, facing our own fears, I may be wrong. Yeah, you know what? But you may be right. You may be right. And even if you are wrong, you're still right. Because no one is going to be offended by you asking a question. And when they do get to a point where they're having thoughts of suicide, guess who they're going to come to? They're going to come to you. Because they know that you are a courageous man or woman who's not afraid to look at the difficult questions of life. Does that make sense? Oh, this is a very important one. I may put the thought in their head. You're not going to put the thought in their head. I believe that God has created within the universe this DNA that, scientists have proven the existence of DNA. So I'm not saying anything contrary to faith, right? We know that DNA exists. It's what gives us life. And so I believe that God's put within us this DNA that says live, 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 live. In fact, go home and do the research tonight. I was studying a prestigious medical journal not long ago, and they were showing that 24 to 48 hours after death, there's DNA in our bodies that sparks back to life. It's not enough to bring us back to life. In fact, it's the same DNA that was active right at birth as part of the umbilical cord. Isn't that incredible? And that same DNA, which had been lying dormant all your life, sparks back to life. It's like the battery trying to jump off, the car. It's not enough to bring you back to life. But what does that say? There's a DNA in us that wants to live. And so when someone's hope has been crushed, you say their DNA's gone. No, there's life in there. It's just covered up with a bunch of mire and dirt and all kind of junk. I was sitting on the back porch with a veteran one day that had been suicidal, been through some terrible stuff. And back in the back, he had an old camper that at one time had been used for a lot of neat stuff. He had a gravel driveway that rolled back to it and had laid some bricks around it to protect it and everything and to line it off from the rest of the yard. But you could tell that the camper had not been used in some time. And little sprig trees were bursting up through the gravel and through the dirt and the blocks that had been laid down for a little path there. And I said, "What's going on with those sprigs there?" He said, "I guess I just didn't do a good job of getting the roots up. I'm just bad at everything I do." I said, "No, that's not it." I said, "What that tells me is that you thought you had gotten the DNA out of the ground, but it was still down in the ground. And it was saying, I want to live, I want to live, I want to live." And it's going to do anything it can to burst through to life. And so if we're willing to be courageous, and if we're willing to ask the questions that most people, only 1% will ask, we're going to see lives transformed. We're going to see hope renewed. Because most people don't want to kill themselves. That's the reality. The power of presence, the power to restore hope is proportional to your ability to step outside of your own comfort zone, into the discomfort zone of other people. I'm able to do what I do because I know that my own son stepped out of his discomfort, out of his comfort zone, into my discomfort to save my life. And if you look at that again, that's the gospel. Yeah. Because Jesus left his home to come down here to you and me to set us free. Isn't it?
Yes.
This is again Andreas. Took his life last November. The power of presence should not be confused with the power of positive thinking. There's a lot of folks that say, well, you just need to think positive. You need to think positive. Well, University of Queensland's done studies that can put more pressure on you. So, it's not that I'm saying that you don't want to think positive, because as a man thinks, so is he. And what does Philippians say? Whatever's right, whatever's good, whatever's honorable, dwell on these things. I'm not saying we shouldn't think positive, but I'm saying that alone is not enough. It's not the power of positive thinking that's going to change my life. It's the power of Christ to make my thinking positive.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of a difference. And I know this is going to get played on YouTube or whatever. That's okay. That's okay, because you know what? A lot of people need to understand that. Most of the time I am very careful in the settings that I teach in, because I know that I won't get asked back if I share what's really right here on my heart. But here's what's on my heart tonight. I don't think that y'all just showed up tonight for no reason, right? None of you did. And here's the reality. I was riding up to Dahlonega today. I called a friend of mine, haven't talked to him in a while, and he said he's trying to work with a person that's struggling, that's suicidal, and she has no desire to have anything to do with God. He said, how do I work with that? Well, that we just have to meet them where they're at, which is what Jesus did. Love them, show them grace, and just be a mirror image of God until they can get to a point where they're really willing to begin to have that discussion, right? What did the Marine say to me? I'm not a religious man. That's okay. He said, but 15 minutes later, he says, Chaplain, I do have questions. How many people would say that? I have questions. But hey, let's don't end our life over it. Let's go to the one who might be able to address those questions and help us understand that my life has purpose. My life has meaning. I had reached a point where I thought that my life didn't have any purpose anymore. And some bad things had happened, and I had spiraled down. But because of my son, who was willing to ask a question, are you thinking of suicide? I rediscovered that hope. And I would also say, in a room with this many people in it, I know that maybe there's somebody in this room tonight that's had the thought of suicide. If you have, see Tammy, see me, see my wife. Reach out to the Georgia Crisis Line. But do not give up yet. Do not give up yet. Keep pressing on. There's a verse of Scripture that says we will weep for an evening, right? But joy comes in the morning. We're all going to go through bad times. We're all going to have difficulties. We may even have the thought of suicide. One of the things that I often share with teenagers especially, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. And I do not have to act on that thought. My goodness, no one in this room tonight would be in this room tonight if we acted on every thought we had.
That's true.
Right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would be dead or in jail, right? If I acted on every thought I have. I'm serious. I got to share this one with you, and then I'm going to be quiet and answer some questions. Sherry had sent me to the grocery store to get a big old 5-pound Tide. You remember the big old buckets of Tide back before they started making all the little pods that people eat nowadays? And so that's the only thing I had to get. I had one item. I'm at Kroger. I had one item, and I am trying to get to that 10 items or less line, right? And this little old lady's coming the opposite direction. Her bag was overflowing. She had 20 items easy, 20. And she's like she was speeding up to cut me off. Right? So I yielded to her. I'm like, yeah, you go right ahead. But in my heart, right? In my heart, man, I'm standing behind her. I wanted to just roll Tide all over her, right? But I didn't do it. Why? Because we don't have to act on every thought that we have. If we did, none of us would be here. I certainly wouldn't be. I'd be in Fayette County Jail with Tide all over me. Right? So it's just a thought. It's just like the weather. Man, it's been beautiful lately, right? But it rained all summer, didn't it? I mean, it rotted my tomatoes. I didn't get any good tomatoes this year. But you know, I didn't kill myself over it because I knew it was just the weather, right? And this too shall pass. But we have to hold on, right? Very quickly, these are some of the other things you might think about. I can see that thinking about, y'all know this movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
Christmas Story.
Yes.
I actually bought the adult-sized version of that. I do videos now in a pink bunny outfit. I really do.
Money from hell.
Yeah. It's scary. It gets people's attention. But there's a point in it. You have to go check it out. But here's the point. Fill in the blank. I can see that thinking about the divorce. That's the reason. It's the words association, right? I can see that thinking about the cancer. I can see that thinking about the layoff, right, is painful. Tell me what's going on, right? I worked my way through Eastern Airlines as a college student. I worked my way through college at Eastern Airlines. What did I say? It's late. It's late. But I worked my way through college at Eastern Airlines. Some of y'all remember that name, right? Yeah. Used to be a big company. Yeah. Did you fly for Eastern? So that's probably where I've seen you before. No. So, gee whiz, that's a long time ago. But here's the thing. Eastern went under,
Yes.
right? 6 people in the Atlanta hub killed themselves within a year. Did you know that? 6 people. And that's just in Atlanta that we know of, directly because of Eastern Airline. 2008, the economy crashed. An additional 10,000 people died from suicide because the economy crashed. Some of them right here in this county. Right here in this county. So I can see that thinking about the bankruptcy, I can see, and just fill in the blank, whatever it is. Another one real quick, and we're going to fly through these. So what are you telling yourself? So what are you telling yourself? Well, my life is worthless. Life is over. My family would be better off without me. Well, let's see if, don't argue with them. You know, and don't just sit there. Well, you need to think positive. But encourage them, coach them, mentor them. What can we do to maybe change that thought? What can we think about that might move us in the right direction? Don't tell them they've got to do it. Encourage them to move in that direction. There's a huge difference between, you know, encouragement and putting somebody under your thumb and saying, you got to do it this way. How well are you sleeping? When was the last time you had a good meal? These are all questions that we can use to work up to asking. Well, and so what happens is, you know, I can see that the divorce has been painful, getting laid off at Eastern, that was tough, and that's why your wife left you, I'm assuming, and you haven't been sleeping, and so I got to ask you a question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? And it's that pointed. I don't beat around the bush or anything. I go straight to the point. Because you know what? That's what they need. You know, how many of y'all know CPR? Anybody in here? I'm feeling better already. Look, if I were to grab my chest and fall down on the ground, y'all could get over in the corner and discuss what y'all think's going on with Ken. I mean, he may be having a problem. No, I don't want you to do that. I want you to come over here and start doing CPR on me. Because that's what I need in the moment. Now, some of y'all might start praying for me. That'd be great. That would help, certainly. Somebody might get on the phone and call 911, tell them to get the bus over here to take me to the hospital. But what I need specifically is for somebody to start doing the ABCs on me. Right? Y'all know the ABCs. That's what I need right now. Pray too. But there's something in the Bible about faith without works.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of poignant, isn't it? If we don't do the work, somebody will die. So we have to do the work. And that work is ask them the question about suicide. So very quickly, I'm going to just speed through this and get to the questions here. Things like going through, they have thoughts of suicide. So we've already talked, that's the way you can preface it. And by prefacing it that way, you normalize it. And then ask them, are you having thoughts of suicide? Non-judgmentally, no surprise. You know, we don't want to go, are you having thoughts of suicide? No, just are you having thoughts of suicide? Just normal conversational tone. Pause. Don't be afraid of the silence. Let the question sink in, and guarantee you most of the time they're going to say, yeah, I have had those thoughts.
And then where do you go from there?
Do you have a plan?
Hmm?
Do you have a plan?
Oh.
When do you plan to do this? I had a lady say May 14th. What is it about May 14th? Well, that's when he gave me the divorce papers.
Hmm.
So those are the things. So here's the bottom line. If it's okay with Tammy, I'm going to go ahead and share this. You know, we've been in the area now for several years, and like any nonprofit small organization, we always struggle to stay alive, but God has blessed us. And so now what we're doing right here in Fayette County, we're offering the Listen, Learn, Lead free of charge, because we've got some great community partners that have reached out to us and say, Ken, keep doing what you're doing. Train as many people as you can, because we've caught hold of the vision that we want this community to be the strongest community in the state of Georgia, and it's going to take a lot of people getting trained. I don't know what the tipping point will eventually be, but I know that we will know it when we get there, right? So we're going to keep training people and training people and training people until we've gotten to where we're supposed to be.
So when are some trainings?
Well, here's what I wanted to share with you. We've got a good core group right here. Perhaps we can figure it out, and then we could reach out. You reach out through your ministry, tell them you're partnered with us to do this, and let's get the word out and say, hey, Legacy Ministries is partnered with AFM to get more people trained, and let's let this core group be the group that does it. And if everybody brings 2 or 3 people with you, we'll have a great workshop. It is 5 hours of intense training, and we can do it on a Friday, a Saturday, anytime. We can do it, 6 o'clock in the morning if you want to. I don't care when we do it, but we just need to do it, right? We just need to do it. And so that's what I wanted to leave you as my challenge and encouragement to everybody in this room. Work with Tammy, she'll work with me, we'll find a date, we'll get everybody plugged in, and we'll do the 5-hour workshop so that we can address more questions. So that's what I wanted to leave you guys with. Also, put this phone number in your phone, 1-800-715-4225. I am the community liaison for special projects with BHL, and just started doing that here recently. And my goal is to help everybody get this number in their phone. So put it in your phone, save it. That's the Georgia Crisis Line number. And here's the thing, it's 24/7.